I'm going to go into Photoshop, and I've got, first of all of my panorama shots just kind of laid out on my desktop for now, and I've also got my HDR photos lined up as well. For the HDRs especially, what I do is I'll take out, if I want to do one shot, remember one shot's made up of 3 or more types of images. I pull those 3 images onto my desktop or into a different folder. It just makes it easier to find these photographs. That'll save you a lot of time. Same way for your panoramas. Go ahead and find the images that you're going to work with first and place them off somewhere else that it's easier to pick those up. So that's why those are on my desktop. Jump into Photoshop. Let me show you the HDR editing first. To do this, you can go to File, down to Automate. At the very bottom, there's Merge to HDR Pro. With this one, the first thing it's going to ask you to do is to select the images that you want to work with. So I'm going to hit Browse, and I know I've got them on my desktop. It's these 3 right here. And we'll hit Open. Also, at the very bottom it says Attempt to Align Automatically. If you didn't take any photographs on a tripod, and so if it was off by just a little bit, the computer will still attempt to align them up. So if you didn't have a tripod, this is very important to have that checked off. Since you did use a tripod, it really won't matter, but we'll keep it checked off anyway. We'll say OK to that. So the next thing it's going to do, it's going to take a little while to do this. It's going to open up each of the images and look through them, attempt to align them, and it'll give me a little editing box. So of course the first one that I took was too light, and I took another one that would be just right, and another one that was too dark. Give it just a second. You'll also see that I took each of these in Camera Raw. You can edit these in Camera Raw, but I told y'all it'd be best if you did it in JPEG, just so it'll go a little bit faster. The algorithms still work the same. I just wasn't taking my own advice that day. Anybody else get any good photographs of these cars while we're out at the Ag Museum? They tend to turn out really neat once you did. Those and the tractors are pretty cool. All right, so this is the first thing that I get. It's not going to look spectacular. As a matter of fact, most of the HDR photos, if you take them, they're just going to look like a regular exposed photograph. So they don't have those nice bright candy colors, not very sharp type images. So if you get something that looks like this, that's totally okay. It's totally normal. All of your editing sliders are on the right-hand side, and each does something a little bit different. And every photograph is going to be different, so there's more of an art to this than a science. But let's just kind of go through and see what each one of these do. First of all, the edge glow. So this has to deal with the pixels that are side by side from one another. How much contrast or how much difference is there between each of these. So I'm going to pull the radius up and just kind of see what difference it does make. It may take just a second. It's very, very slight. So I'm going to pull it all the way up and see if we can see a major difference. Not very much different. I'll pull up the strength as well and see if that'll do something. There we go. So now we're starting to see, I'm losing a lot of detail in my skies. I'm getting a lot more contrast in the edges that I did. So here it was before, and there it was after. Just a little bit of strength in the detail of that one. Okay, so that's one thing. Real easy to do. By the way, if you do want to keep some detail, like for instance this Ford logo, I want to be able to see the line that goes around this one. If you start losing detail at the very, very bottom, there it is, edge smoothness, if you'll turn that on, that'll preserve any of the details that are around your edges. It'll keep them smooth and looking good. So I usually keep that on as well. Let's look at the tone and the detail. This is really where it starts to look like an HDR photograph. I'm bumping up my detail, and maybe the gamma, the exposure. Oh, there we go. So now my colors are really starting to change. Let's pull the detail maybe down, detail way up. We'll pull my gamma and exposure back down. Check out the detail in the tire as I change it out. So I'm going to bring the detail way down. You can't really see that edge right there. But when I bring it back up, Oh, yeah, I guess it already changed. You can, it does bring out some of the highlighted detail. No, it's hard to see on the overhead. And then we can play around with the highlights, the shadows. This is the same as editing in the camera raw, so you can change those up in the vibrance of the colors. Okay, so this is just the basics. Now here's to make it look really spectacular. At the very, very top of your editing thing, under preset, it's either set to default or to custom, especially if you start moving things around. There are some predefined styles that are built into the HDR editor. And if you play around with these, they'll automatically set your settings to give you a certain type of effect. So I'm just going to kind of click through some of these to show you some different things. You can see they're monochromatic, so if you want a good black and white photo that does something, high contrast or low contrast. If you want to play with the saturation, there we go, of the photograph. And some of them even do get into a surrealistic type of look to them. Let's see what City Twilight makes our photograph looks. So automatically, there it was before. So here's the default. Looks like this. City Twilight gives it that type of feel to it. Notice the contrast and everything that's in the wheels. One of the best ones I found is Scott 5. This is the one that really makes it look like an HDR photograph. All of your highlights we brought up and all of it. Let's check that out. It's really cool. You got good, look at the clouds in the background, all the details that are on top of here. However, check out my Ford logo. See how I'm losing all of that detail that's around there? It's something you kind of want to stay around with, and so this is something that you would definitely play around with. Let's turn on edge smoothing and see what happens. The edge smoothing turned on. Bingo. Now edge smoothing is turned on. Now check out the logo. I've preserved some of the detail that's around that one. So that's why that's important for there. Another thing to pay attention to, at the very bottom left-hand side of your screen, these are the 3 images that you're working with. Now I just took 3. If you have more will show up at the bottom as well. If you click on either one of these, right now I've got a green line around the last one. It'll also change out the details or how your image may look on here. So if I clicked on the middle one, let's see if it'll change up a little bit. So here's the last one. Not really changing up. Sometimes it'll give you a different look depending on the one that you chose on there. Actually, check out the this tree at the very top as I click between the two. Notice that the wind was blowing, so this tree is actually going to be a little bit different. See if we can look at it. So look at the tree. See it change? Click on the first one. See it change? So what it's doing is it's giving dominance to one of the images, and since each of the images was moving, that's what's showing you the change between those 3. This is another reason why you want to have a tripod. But once you do the, especially since I did Scott 5, check out the detail that you're getting on the wood texture, on the car seat that's there as well. This is something that really brings up what you're working with. Any questions so far on this? Very simple. All you're doing is you're letting the computer do the work for you, which it ain't bad in some cases. As soon as you're okay with this, click OK at the bottom right-hand corner. And this will merge all the files together and it'll open it up into Photoshop itself. Once you're in Photoshop, you can go in, you can crop it, you can tweak the colors, you can do all the editing that we've been doing in the past as well. Let's give it just a second to do that. And I believe it should be just one layer itself. Yeah, so it's all one layer, and this is before, and it's crawling along today.
After you click OK and then you're working with it in a regular layer in Photoshop, is there a way to go back?
There's no way to go back to it. Of course, you still have your original images that you can always dump it back in, but good question. You can't undo the HDR that's created. Do save this file once it is created so you can have at least a copy of what you're working on. I will give you kind of a fair warning. The HDR photographs look really good, especially with all the bright details and the candy colors. If you go too far with it, it doesn't look very good at all. It's almost, it's like too much sugar. If you eat too much sugar, it's bad for you. So too much color, too much detail for the eyes tends to be very bad. You could find tons of bad HDRs online that look like this. So kind of know your limits when working with these as well. So you can save this one and work from it. I'm going to close it out and we'll hit Don't Save. So that's creating an HDR photo. Here's how you can do the panoramic type photos. Works almost exactly the same way. There's a couple of little things to think about. For this one, check out how many photographs I took just to make up this image. I took 3 different rows of about 5 images. So all of these are being merged together to create this one particular image in itself. So here's how I did that. I'm going to close it out. We're going to go back up to File, down to Automate, and with this one, we're going to choose Photo Merge. It's going to ask you to, first of all, find your images. By the way, if you're not doing a panorama, let's say you have just a large image or that you've taken multiple pictures of. I've actually had somebody had a torn up photograph that was that I just scanned in all of the torn pieces. At the very bottom, you can choose Reposition, and it'll look at each of the pieces and put them back together as well. So this doesn't necessarily have to be a photo panorama. But anyway, I'm going to keep Layout at Auto. Let's browse and pick up all of our images. In this case, I did use JPEGs. We'll open them up. At the very bottom, make sure Geometric Distortion is clicked off. It'll just help you out in doing the cropping. If not, I don't think it'll work for this one, but it'll tend to warp your image a little too much. All right, same with the next one. You're going to see Photoshop open up each of the images, and if you look on the right-hand side, you'll see them load up into a separate layer. And we'll give it just a minute to crunch the numbers. Remember, it's looking for that like edge, so it's actually comparing each of the photographs together. Now, if you do take a photograph, you're going to see them all placed usually in a single line, one beside the other. If Photoshop finds a photograph that doesn't fit anywhere in there, if for whatever reason there's just not enough similarity to it, it'll take that photograph and put it at the top of your document. It's almost like saying, I couldn't find a place to put it, so I'm just going to put it up here. So if that happens, then we'll have to kind of regroup and see how well you can, if you can use it or if you can't use it. I find that happens most often if you're taking photographs of foliage, so like a lot of trees. The trees tend to look a lot the same, so Photoshop wouldn't be able to find where it should line up or what it should work with. I did this one before, so hopefully it'll work out pretty well with this one. Blending the layers, creating layer masks. Almost done. There we go. Cool. So this is the panorama that I've gotten out of this particular image. Looks really nice. Notice at the very edges, however, it's going to be warping. This is it's called lens parallaxing. It's just a geometric distortion of the photograph that you had, and it has to do this in order to perfectly match it up. Every panorama will do something like this, so if you see that, that's totally okay. But it's merged all of these together pretty seamlessly throughout. Sometimes you'll see something that looks like an edge is trying to create it, just trying to work itself in. You can go into Photoshop and fix those things. Remember, we've got our clone stamp tool or the different brush tools to heal those up. With this selected, I can then choose my crop tool. The easiest thing to do to get rid of these upper edges is just to crop them out. I can pull this down until my image is completely, all the edges are, below that crop line. So when I crop it, it's completely removed as well. Let's do it on the edges. And I'm going to leave the bottom one down there just in case, just to see if I can show y'all something cool. So I'm going to hit return, crop it off. Now remember, each of these is in their own separate layer. So I'm going to recommend that you merge each of these layers together to give you one layer. It'll be a lot easier in saving. To merge a layer, there's a couple of things you can do. I find the easiest thing to do is in your layers palette at the top right-hand side, click the down button, and we'll back out and find, there it is, flatten image. You can also merge the layers, but flatten image does the same thing. With this one, now if you look in your layers palette, you've got one background layer that you're working with. Pretty cool? All right. I said you can also get rid of the things at the bottom by doing a couple of special things. Let's see, let's work at this bottom corner edge. I'm gonna select these white pixels. Of course, I could use my clone stamp and I could paint something in there, but I'm gonna use my magic wand and just click at this bottom edge. Everything's all the same. Let's change up my tolerance. So the 15, let's bring it down to 2 pixels. We'll deselect. Try again. Let me zoom in so y'all can see what I'm working with. Very bottom edge, just clicking, great. So now you see I've got my marching ants going around just the white area that's down here. If you hit Shift and Delete, this will bring up your fill options. And in our case, instead of filling it with a solid color, we're going to change this from white to content aware. What content aware will do, and I've shown y'all a couple of y'all this, it's going to look at the pixels that are around the area that I have selected, and it's going to fill them in with like pixels. And usually this does a pretty good job, especially in areas like that have a repeating pattern. Let's try it on this one. I've never done this one before, so I'm going to hit OK. It's a pretty big image, so it may take just a little bit to fill it in. But instead of it being white, it should be something similar to the pixels that are around it. Almost there. Come on. Awesome. Hey, look at what we got here. It found those images. It even repeated that pattern moving right there. Now it created something right there. That doesn't necessarily look too bad, but that's pretty good. Filled it in. Let's zoom across here. So now I've got no white area down at the very bottom. Okay, so here's a pattern of all the rocks and everything. Well, kind of filled it in. Did the best it could. Obviously, it didn't repeat that particular area. So I would still have to go in. That's looking pretty good. But I'd have to go in and maybe with my clone stamp tool. Let's get my clone stamp. I could select an area and clean that up just a little bit. I'd have to play around a little bit more, but not too bad. Oops. I'll select that one, repaint out this area. Oh, I'm trying to go too fast is what's happening. There we go. And kind of get rid of everything that I'm working with. Uh-oh. Zoomed out too far. With that, here's what I have. Not a bad image at all. So now it looks like a perfectly cropped, perfectly good type of image. It's totally okay if it's really wide like this. That's the way a good panorama should turn out. If you do find some areas are too light or too dark, remember you can go in, you can adjust your levels on whichever layer that's too light or too dark to make sure it looks like a solid continuous tone. Any questions on doing a panorama? Just as simple as doing that as well. So I'm going to turn it back over to y'all and let you finish editing these up for today and tomorrow.